everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and it's time to talk about the second ever official All Elite Wrestling show. Third if you count All In. The company wasn't established. Now, you know what I mean. The next one after Double or Nothing. That's right, this was Fyter Fest. A lot of people went into it with very high expectations, but were those expectations met? There's only one way to find out. This is what happened at AEW's Fyter Fest. So we must talk about the pre-show. I'm sure you may have some opinions on the pre-show if you've seen it already. But the first match was really good, to be fair. It was a three-way tag team match featuring the Private Party, who I didn't know too much about. I'd never seen a match of theirs before this. SCU, represented by Kazarian and Scorpio Sky, and the Best Friends, Chucky T and Trent Beretta. And despite only being, the opening match on the pre-show, this was actually, I think, on balance, one of the best matches of the night. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and Ben, who I watched the live stream with, I think said it was actually his favourite match of the entire show. Now, the key thing to take away here is that this was really smartly done, and both members of the Private Party put in a really good performance, but also the way this match was laid out was to really make them the stars. It was a smart move, taking the tag team that everyone's least familiar with and giving them most of the chance to shine, I suppose. They were hitting some really exciting moves. They were really getting some convincing near falls towards the end as well. At one or two stages, I thought they might actually pick up the win over two far more established teams. They didn't win, but I think out of all three teams, they're going to be the ones that most people are talking about coming out of this show. But instead, it was the Best Friends who picked up the victory, hitting, I think, a few knees, and then Beretta hit the Strong Zero, and they were able to pick up the big victory, which sends them into a match to get a chance of being number one, getting a bye in the tournament. There's some sort of stipulation, and it's really confusing, but it's online if you can work it out. But then after the match, with the Best Friends celebrating in the ring, on the Tron appeared the Dark Order, formerly known, of course, as Chikara's Super Smash Brothers, and they basically said, "We're coming for you," in mystical, evil language. Then the lights went down, and when they came back up, the ring was surrounded by, I don't think it was the members of the Dark Order themselves, but it was their minions all around the ring. Beretta and Chucky T were like, "What's going on here?" Lights went down again, and when they came up, all of the minions were gone. When I say minions, I mean henchmen, little helpers, not the yellow bastards. Next up, we had the match that was supposed to be Smiley Kylie Rae versus Leave Abates, the Librarian, but instead we had Allie versus Leave Abates, the Librarian. No word of, as far as I could tell, no word on what happened to Kylie Rae. Hopefully everything's cool. But yeah, so instead we had Allie, who's a perfectly capable wrestler, experienced, good stuff, so I wasn't too concerned. I just would really have liked to have seen Kylie Rae. This match got a little bit slated. I think it had a tricky job following the excellent opener. I think it also had a tricky job considering that one of the contestants was removed from the match for some reason that we can't quite work out yet. But I don't think it was as bad as people were saying. I think it was perfectly fine. In fact, I was pretty impressed with Allie's performance, especially. Her strikes looked really good. Her moves were just generally crisp and pretty solid all round. And Leave Abates was totally fine as well. The only thing that dragged this match back was the Librarian gimmick. It was explained to us, or someone said on our live stream chat, that the Librarian gimmick is basically a joke about producers or owners of wrestling promotions having too much power. Apparently Tony Khan pitched the Librarian gimmick and they found it so silly and ridiculous that they decided to do it twice to show everyone how weird and painful it is. But I'm not sure if the irony is worth its existence, if that makes sense. So we've got obviously Blue Panther, Leave Abates, Peter Avalon as well. They're both Librarians. They came out before the match and cut like a good cop, bad cop promo, which the fans just did not accept at all, really. It also played into the finish with Avalon sneakily helping Leave Abates occasionally from the outside, pulling at Ali's leg and that sort of thing. He gave Leave Abates a book, and then she turned around. Ali took it off her, threw it back, hit the BSE, the best super kick ever, and picked up the clean victory. Despite this interference, I suppose, but the babyface victory. And I just didn't really know what to make of that. So as I say, Ali's performance was fine, really enjoyed it, but the match itself, I feel, was really weighted down by this gimmick that I'm really not sure is paying dividends. Next up, Michael Nakazawa versus Alex Jebailey, the CEO of CEO, this whole gaming thing that's going on in conjunction with Fyter Fest. Alex Jebailey, man, he got himself on the show, probably paid quite a lot, and I feel as though a lot of people in the comments were like, this is a parody of Shane McMahon. This is like meant to be, oh, look how silly it is when people try and get it. But Shane McMahon is 10 times the wrestler of Alex Jebailey, 20 times. This guy's obviously a complete novice, doesn't really seem to have any natural aptitude for it. And you could tell, it was so glaringly obvious. I mean, I've been to, wrestling training schools and seen like kids who are very new to it have more of a natural feel for the wrestling business than Alex Jebailey. I sound really harsh saying that, but the guy, I mean, he really clearly looked like a fish out of water. Nakazawa opened things by cutting a heel promo, a weird heel promo in kind of semi-broken English, where he called Alex Jebailey a cripple, because last year Jebailey trained for a match with Nakazawa and broke his ankle, I believe attempting a missile dropkick in training, which says all you need to know about Alex Jebailey. But he won the match anyway. People carried him over the barrier and he pinned Michael Nakazawa. This is the rematch. Last year was Kenny Omega's event in conjunction with this event, and this year, of course, it's the same, but under the All Elite Wrestling banner. I mean, it seems as though if this is a comment on people getting too involved with wrestling who shouldn't be, and I know it's ironic me saying that, but if this is a comment on that, then Alex Jebailey is the only person not in on the joke, essentially. I mean, a few minutes in, he took the most textbook beginner back bump I've ever seen, just and then immediately no-sold it and got back up. His own bump. And I was just like, what are you doing? His kicks and his strikes were like Jenna Maraska levels. The match I get was meant to be a comedy match, and maybe you think I should have more of a smile on my face and enjoy it a little bit more. And I totally respect that. But at the same time, it wasn't so bad it's good. It was just kind of so bad it's bad. In fairness, things did pick up a little bit. You know, Jebailey can do basic power slams and stuff, obviously with Nakazawa's very apparent help, but they had some fun comedy spots, like when Jebailey tried to drown him in the kiddie pool, or when Nakazawa oiled himself up and got out of the waist lock, and then Jebailey bumped on the oil and that sort of stuff. But then Jebailey got a visual pinfall on Nakazawa with the referee distracted, and then later on, Nakazawa got a thong out. I just don't understand Nakazawa's gimmick, this is my fault. He got a thong out from under his trunks, and then did almost like a mandible claw kind of thing, but Jebailey reversed it into a German, where he dropped him right on the top of his head. And then eventually Nakazawa was able to get the win. He was caught in a pinning predicament by Jebailey, but he used the power of the thong to pin him down to the mat. But then he didn't even sell the effects of the smelly wrestling thong, and Nakazawa won. There was some push pins as well. Push pins, is that what they're called? Little plastic things. One of them got slammed onto that as well at some point, because he's hardcore. Both of them are hardcore, by the way, but especially Alex Jebailey. He will not be getting any points on Wrestlers of the Week. Next up, the first match of the main show proper, Christopher Daniels versus Shima. This is very much more like it. This was a wonderful palate cleanser after that comedy match we'd just seen before, and it was actually, to be fair, really, really good stuff. One of the stronger matches on the show, if a little bit short. It did feel a little bit shorter than I expected. I think it went about sort of 9 minutes or so. It was under 10 minutes, definitely. I can't quite remember what it was, but it was around the 10-minute mark. It was still really good. They packed quite a lot in. It was all fluid and it was all crisp, and you'd expect that from two guys with such experience. Yeah, no major complaints here at all, just really smooth wrestling between two bona fide veterans of the business on different sides of the earth, of course, but it was nice to see them come together for what is basically a little bit of a cool dream match to see on an AEW card. Eventually it was Shima who picked up the victory, somewhat predictably maybe, after he was announced as Omega's opponent in the future, but at the same time there were enough false finishes and swings of momentum that you weren't ever quite certain about that. But Shima picked up the win with an air raid crash followed by a Meteora, and I think as well the two showed respect to each other afterwards. I seem to remember there was a bit of a hug and a handshake, although there's been so much stuff that's happened since that match that I'm struggling to remember, but I think they did hug it out. Next up, the three-way women's match between Nyla Rose, Riho, and Yuka Sakazaki. And this match, more than the last one, I think, seemed to divide a little bit of opinion. It wasn't as slick and as smooth as the last match, certainly, but it was, in all fairness, a little bit more storytelling wise, I guess, a little bit better structured. There were several set piece spots that really helped show off the characters of each woman involved. There were one or two sloppy moments here and there, yes, but at the same time, there were some very impressive ones too, especially from Yuka Sakazaki, who had the crowd pretty much in the palm of her hand. I think she was probably the most popular woman in the match. Also, there was an incredible feat of strength from Nyla Rose where she caught one of her opponents from a crossbody off the top, then another one, and just didn't fall. She just stood there and hit them with a big slam. A very satisfying spot from a bigger opponent onto two smaller ones. It was classic textbook stuff. But eventually though, it was actually Riho, to my surprise, and maybe the surprise of you as well, who picked up the victory, rolling up Nyla Rose after avoiding her finisher and reversing it into sort of a cradle and picking up the victory. Nyla Rose didn't enjoy that very much and has now sort of been established, I guess, as a proper heel, beating up Riho after the match. And then Riho was saved by Yuka, and then Riho shoved Yuka away. And then Yuka looked absolutely heartbroken. Her acting was absolutely on point here. I felt so sorry for her. She looked legitimately very upset. Riho, how can you have done that? Next up, the fatal four-way between MJF, Hangman Adam Page, Jimmy Havoc, and Jungle Boy as well, accompanied by his best friend, Luchasaurus. Adorable. Kip Sabian was on commentary for this one because he'll go on to face the winner of this match in 2 weeks at Fight for the Fallen, so it made sense to have him out there, I suppose. Guess that was his little reward for winning on the pre-show of Double or Nothing. This was certainly a good match. There was a lot of stuff packed into it. Most of it worked. I don't think it was like an amazing match by any stretch of the imagination, but it was still very good and very fun. I think that probably sums up Fyter Fest as a show. Not high level, top tier amazing, but still very good and very fun. It was also kind of built around the rivalry between Hangman and MJF, which is really sort of scintillating. Everyone really wants Hangman to get his hands on MJF. It actually looked as though Jimmy Havoc, though, had the match won at one point. He was set to hit MJF with the Acid Rainmaker, but MJF poked him in the eyes, but then Hangman took full advantage, springing into the ring, buckshot lariat. He went to take MJF's head off. He rolled out the way. He caught Jimmy Havoc, finished off Havoc, and MJF was left seething on the ramp. Next up, Cody versus Darby Allin. On balance, I think maybe my favourite match of the night, although this wasn't as clear in my mind anyway as Double or Nothing, where Cody versus Dustin was clearly the best match of the night, for me anyway. In this case, I still haven't really decided what my favourite match of the night was, but this is certainly one of the contenders. This started off really sort of slick and smooth. Darby's great, and Cody actually looked more wrestly than usual, if that makes any sense. You know that Cody's often criticised for not being as much of a natural in the ring as, for example, his brother or someone like Kenny Omega. But in this match, he really did look like one. He was looking pretty slick and smooth early on. And also, for those unfamiliar with Darby Allin, he got to really show off his bumping ability. This man bumps like nobody else. He's a smaller guy and is obviously just an expert at garnering sympathy from the crowd. Despite playing like a darker, broodier character, he still really brings a humanity to the ring that I find really enjoyable. The match was kind of following a more orthodox structure at first, with Cody beating down the smaller man, Darby Allin trying to fight back and get in the crowd behind him, and then things just took a turn for the crazy because Darby Allin went for the coffin drop, which is like almost like Kofi's trust fall. Did it off the turnbuckle, Cody was in the way, he moved, and Darby Allin just took a flat back bump on the apron from the top rope. It was disgusting. Allin was then placed in his own body bag by Cody, which had Cody 1-1 written on it, as in Darby was predicting what Cody's record would be in AEW after this was over. Cody zipped Darby into the body bag, hit him with the disaster kick, but Darby Allin still kept fighting and it didn't put him down for the 3 count. At this point, it became apparent that the time limit for the match was running out and Cody became increasingly frustrated, whipping Darby Allin with his belt, going for the crossroads, but Darby reversed into a stunner, but then Cody managed to stay on his feet and hit the crossroads anyway, but he was too tired to make the pinfall, and in just the sort of most perfect example of this sort of spot I can ever remember seeing in wrestling, the referee's hand was coming down for the 3 count as time expired, which was just amazingly done. I predicted Cody would win this match over Darby Allin, but I think the idea of having a draw is actually really good because everyone was expecting Cody to win, and I think the fact that they've had a draw keeps things a little bit unpredictable in AEW and shows that maybe ties are always a possibility. It's a pretty intriguing concept. After the match though, I have less positive things to say about the post-bout angle, I'm afraid. That's for 2 reasons, really. First of all, here's what happened. Sean Spears hit the ring, obviously in real life, a personal friend of Cody's and stuff, and that's bled into the sort of storylines as well, but not anymore, because he absolutely waffled Cody with a chair. Cody got hit on the side of the head, but the back of his head was cut open. I'm not sure if that was from the chair or whether that was like a sneaky sort of blade job, but it looked brutal. It looked like a wasted screen on Grand Theft Auto. It was pretty bad. And yeah, and then, you know, people ran out and helped Cody and stuff. One of them was MJF playing into his whole, oh, salt of the earth, I'm such a good friend kind of thing. But the main issue I have with this, I have 2 issues. One, why are you taking unprotected chair shots to the head? I hope there was some kind of smoke and mirrors, no pun intended, to hide the sort of impact, but I don't think there was. I think he just took it full in the side of the head. I hope not. I really hope not. He did tweet, though, that he suffered no concussion, which is great news. Secondly, my second issue is, and this is one that Ben actually came up with, this sort of takes away from Darby Allin's moment. They could have done this at a different time, maybe. I feel as though Darby is now a little bit forgotten in the aftermath of the match, when really, this should have been a star-making performance. Next up, 6-man tag team action between the Elite, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks, who dressed as Street Fighter characters, Ryu, Ken, and Akuma, and the Lucha Brothers and Laredo Kid, who didn't dress up, because they're not nerds. So much stuff happened in this match, of course, it's impossible to recap it beat by beat, but it was along the similar lines of the match between the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros at Double or Nothing. Loads of stuff, crazy spots, referee being really lax with the rules about, you know, people staying on the apron and that sort of thing. This was basically a tornado tag for the majority of its duration. But was it as good as that Las Vegas match? For me, not quite. It was still really enjoyable and on balance, probably one of the stronger matches of the night. Maybe a match of the night contender if that's your sort of thing. But no, for me, it wasn't quite as good as that Bucks and Lucha Brothers match. Not that there's too much wrong with that, because that was an excellent match and this would have had a lot to live up to even match that. There was a really unfortunate mistake at one crucial moment where there was like a devilish spot being set up on the outside where Matt Jackson was holding one of his opponents. There was going to be some kind of like diving Meltzer driver, but then Nick Jackson slipped on the ropes as he tried to get up. Phoenix was meant to be countering, jumping in from the side. There was so much going on and they had to delay it and it looked a bit clunky. They still saved it, which is a testament to the incredible skill of all the men involved, but it was just little things like that that didn't quite happen in that Double or Nothing match that for me just gives the first match a little bit of an edge. In the end, Omega won it for his team, V-triggering Laredo Kid out of mid-air, nailing him with another V-trigger and a one-winged angel, and picking up the big victory, keeping Omega strong for his future matches with the likes of Moxley, and keeping the Bucks strong as well for their future match against Cody and Dustin. And Kenny and Pentagon kept their rivalry going after the match, getting each other's faces, getting very intense, and basically teasing, I guess, another confrontation down the line. And finally, the main event, Jon Moxley versus Joe Janela in an unsanctioned match. This was a crazy, wild, hardcore brawl, and basically everything we thought it would be. There were all the tropes of a brawl early on, they brawled in the crowd, Moxley was cut up early on, kind of around the side of his eye, and then things got steadily crazier and crazier. I thought this match was laid out pretty well. Obviously, from a selling and psychology point of view, it wasn't the best thing on the show, but in terms of structuring a match around several peaks and troughs, I thought it followed, ironically, a pretty traditional and effective model. They cut each other open early on with a chair that was just absolutely covered in barbed wire. It looked very nasty and real. It looked real as well. I think it was legit, dangerous barbed wire. It was tearing at their flesh and all sorts. Quite uncomfortable moments in this match, to be quite honest with you. There were also some of those boards with barbed wire on it that Terry Funk and Mick Foley love so much. And there were some standard tables as well. How very normal. The spots based around the tables, though, were not the sort of stuff we're used to seeing on WWE TV, for example, on a regular basis. Janela Russian leg sweeped the pair of them, himself and his opponent, off the apron through a table at one stage. That was a pretty nasty spot, in a good way, or as good as it can be. And then also, Moxley was laid on tables on the outside. Janela scaled a huge ladder in the ring and dropped a massive elbow to the outside of the ring onto the tables. And again, as safely as that spot can kind of be executed, I think they pretty much nailed it. But yeah, there was a lot of watching this match through your fingers or from behind the sofa. Moxley then hit the Death Rider out of nowhere, almost like an RKO, which really turned the tide of the match. He followed that up with a Death Valley driver from inside the ring to the outside through a bridge made on the apron from one of those boards with the barbed wire on it that I just said, Mick Foley and Terry Funk, you know the boards I'm talking about. And then came what will be remembered, I guess, as the signature moment of this match, the thumbtacks. Moxley with so many thumbtacks. I think he retrieved 2 loads of thumbtacks by the end of it. The ring was covered in them. And Janela took 3 pretty nasty bumps through them. One, which I think was just a back bump, but he landed mainly on his arm. It was Moxley's like X-Plex kind of thing that he does now. There was also a bump onto his bare feet because Moxley removed his boots, which was just horrible. I've seen Jimmy Havoc do it before. Never gets any more pleasant to watch. You never quite get used to that sort of thing. And finally, unclimactically, the Death Rider as well into the thumbtacks, finishing off Janela and allowing Moxley to win his debut match in All Elite Wrestling. But it wasn't all said and done, because as he was making his way up the ramp, Kenny Omega met him with a huge V-trigger. Omega then beat Moxley down all around like the Fyter Fest set using the band equipment from the band that never showed up. There was a lot of backstage stuff, by the way, involving the Fyter Fest documentary that this whole thing was based on. And if you haven't seen it, you won't get it. I have seen it, and it was kind of amusing, but at times it sort of distracted a little bit. But enough said about that. Basically, this beatdown was revenge from Kenny for what Moxley did to him in Las Vegas after Double or Nothing. Then, it seemed as though the attack was over. Referees were helping Moxley to the back. He shoved them down, and here came Kenny with a trash can again to continue the beatdown. And then Kenny posed and stood tall like, oh yes, I've got my revenge. But the camera caught Moxley laughing at him, laughing about the beatdown, showing himself to be really sadistic and dangerous. And I just cannot wait for them to have a lovely wrestling match. So that is what happened at All Elite Wrestling's Fyter Fest. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What was your favourite match? Who was your favourite performer? What did you think of the show in general? I'd like to give a shout out to Ben for joining me on live stream and for editing this video as well. And yeah, there's not much more to say. See you next time. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.